Imagine you wake up and overnight you've transformed into a monstrous insect. Absurd, right? Well, this is the focus of the novel The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. The work is somehow both absurd and relatable. Kafka is able to express this darkness in different forms, both simply, slept awoke, miserable life, and poetically, I am a cage in search of a bird. Schopenhauer was also famously pessimistic. He believed the will was an irrational force that drives all existence. In humans, this will leads to a permanent state of wanting and suffering, very similar to the ideas of Buddhism. The more I study philosophy, I see that all lives are a reaction to suffering. Some thinkers, like Philip Mainlander, argued that life is pointless and that the only desirable state is the nothingness of death. Emile Cioran believed that it is a catastrophe to be born and that hope is a dangerous illusion. It is interesting, however, to see that the same starting point of suffering can yield different conclusions. Camus, for instance, argues that embracing the absurdity of trying to find meaning in suffering is an act of rebellion that takes courage and defiance. In his view, rebellion is an affirmation of human dignity and existence. Nietzsche, once a disciple of Schopenhauer, took this inherent suffering of life and instead of trying to deny it, embraced it as part of the process of becoming your fullest self. This philosophy pushed for the affirmation rather than the denunciation of life. Have you ever heard the idea, existence precedes essence? This is an idea put forward by Jean-Paul Sartre and postulates that humans are born without a predetermined purpose. In a universe without God to set the rules, we are condemned to be free and must create our own meaning through our actions. For me, philosophy has always been a means to inform the way I live my life. Everyone comes face to face with suffering. It is in one's reaction to this suffering that ultimately decides their fate. This response to suffering is at the heart of the entire existentialist movement. Goethe presented suffering as a choice between two paths: the hammer, the path of action, conquest, and triumph, and the anvil, the path of passive endurance and losing. You have a choice to either be crushed by suffering or to use it to forge a more resilient self. Now the entree of this video may finally be served. Carlo Michele Stratter's Persuasion and Rhetoric, 1910. A book written by a 23-year-old Italian philosopher who completed the manuscript and died by suicide that same day. Carlo builds his entire book around a stark binary: persuasion, though not persuasion as in convincing someone, but a mode of absolute existential self-possession, a state of inward completeness, a refusal to outsource meaning and value assignment, a kind of radical autonomy, whose closest philosophical relatives are Socratic integrity and Nietzsche's amor fati, or love of fate. But Carlo insists that you cannot define this idea exactly. To define it is to make it abstract, to turn something lived into something conceptual. Persuasion is a state to which true philosophers, which he believes to be Parmenides and Socrates, aspire with the full understanding that it can never be attained, with the limit approached asymptotically. Rhetoric, however, stands in stark contrast to this idea of persuasion. Not rhetoric in terms of eloquence, but in terms of all psychological and social mechanisms that promise satisfactions later, elsewhere. The whole cultural industrial complex that keeps people busy, productive, and asleep. Carlo's rhetoric is essentially the structure of an inauthentic life, a life lived for the future, always accumulating, always wanting, always waiting, always not yet. Where persuasion is self-possession, rhetoric is self-evasion. Rhetorical life is built on lack. Whoever does not have himself must continuously have something. This anticipates Heidegger's notion of falling, referring to the human tendency to become absorbed in the everyday public world and its conventional activities, leading to an inauthentic experience. This is a horizontal absorption, a falling into the world, not a vertical movement. Authentic existence involves a resistance to this tendency. Carlo saw life as running on a treadmill of needs. Along the usual ways men travel in a circle with no beginning or end, They come, go, complete, throng about like busy ants, change places certainly, since no matter how much they walk, they are always where they were before, because one place is as good as another in the valley without exit. Society, from school to work to politics, was and is still a system designed to keep people in motion, always dependent on external validation and goals. It is a critique that reminds me of Nietzsche's herd mentality. Nietzsche writes, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Do you see how these ideas are fundamentally dark? They're fundamentally dark philosophies because they presume that the common man's likelihood is to end up not fulfilling the highest possibility of what they could become. We have this idea today that common necessarily has to be bad. Let's raise the entire proportion of people up a whole standard deviation so that common can actually still be good. Are you going to allow other people to decide your fate, or are you going to decide your own? That is the fundamental question of your life. Thank you for watching Max Depth, the place for deep ideas. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you.